The first sound is always the drip, a slow, patient rhythm that gnaws at the silence until the silence itself feels unnatural. It echoes along the vaulted ceilings of the Imperial dungeon, falling from cracks in the blackened stone like the ticking of some ancient, cruel clock. Those who wake in these depths quickly learn that the drip is both companion and tormentor. It measures time in droplets rather than days, and in a place where the light of Terra never shines, such measurements become the only tether to reality. The walls themselves are a prison, carved from rockcrete older than memory, their surfaces damp with condensation that reeks faintly of promethium. Chains clatter as prisoners shift in the dark, but the chains are not what binds them. It is the weight of despair, the certainty that the Imperium does not care if they live another hour, another second. Somewhere above, the great city hums with industry and prayer, yet down here there is only rot, and the stale breath of those condemned. The Adeptus Arbits who patrol these halls do so with the mechanical efficiency of men convinced of their righteousness. They wear their armor not as protection, but as symbols. Black carapace, gilded aquila, visors that strip them of humanity. Their boots strike the flagstones with metronomic precision, a sound that makes every chained soul flinch. Punishment here is not dispensed in singular bursts of violence, but in the constant reminder that freedom, mercy, and light are luxuries reserved for those beyond the iron doors. Yet the prisoners are not silent. They whisper, they pray, they scream. Their voices rise in fragments, colliding and overlapping in a cacophony that seeps into the stones themselves. One mutters the litany of endurance under his breath, each syllable trembling with fever. Another sings hymns to the Emperor, though her voice cracks and falters on every third word. And deeper in the shadows, someone speaks words that should not be heard, syllables twisted by fear into invocations that the Arbites pretend not to notice. To speak them aloud is heresy, but in the bowels of the Imperium, heresy and despair are often indistinguishable. A cell door groans as it is opened, rust grinding against hinges long neglected. The torchlight reveals a face, hollow eyes set in a skull-like visage, lips cracked, skin stretched too tightly across bones. The prisoner does not shield his gaze from the light. Instead, he stares into it hungrily, as though he might swallow the fire whole and keep it burning within him. But the torch moves on and darkness rushes back in, swift and merciless. His gaze follows the Arbites until the echoes of their steps vanish. Then he slumps against the stone, breath rattling like parchment. The dungeons are not uniform. Some cells are narrow slits where one cannot even lie down. Others are vast chambers, their darkness punctuated by the faint glow of electro candles guttering on the walls. In these larger halls, dozens huddle together, bodies pressed so tightly that they cannot tell where one person ends and another begins. Lice crawl unchecked, disease blossoms in every breath, and yet the Arbits do not intervene. Why would they? To them, this suffering is not neglect, it is judgment. What crime earns a man or woman a place in such a pit? The prisoners ask themselves this endlessly, for many do not even know. Some are rebels who raised arms against the Imperial Guard and were captured alive by chance or mistake. Others are scholars accused of reading a forbidden text, their guilt decided before trial. Entire families have been dragged here for the suspicion of consorting with psychers. And then there are those whose only crime was being in the wrong place before the wrong eyes at the wrong time. In the Imperium, innocence is not protection. It is merely an illusion, stripped away with a single accusation. At times, the prisoners imagine what lies beyond the dungeon walls. They speak of the sky, though most have not seen it in years. They conjure memories of sunlight, of the great bells that toll in honor of the Emperor, of incense rising from cathedral spires. They tell these stories not to comfort, but to torture themselves with what they have lost. Hope here is not a balm. It is a blade turned inward, cutting deeper with every recollection of freedom. Still, there are those who endure. They carve marks into the stone to count the days, though the tally stretches far beyond reason. They whisper to one another through cracks in the walls, building fragile connections in the darkness. They cling to the idea that the Emperor sees all, that their suffering has purpose, that justice will someday descend upon this place like a cleansing fire. Whether they believe it or simply need to believe it hardly matters. In a world of chains and silence, faith is the last rebellion left, and yet the stones themselves remember. Every scream, every whispered plea, every drip of blood into the cracks, it all lingers. Walk long enough in the dungeons and the echoes twist into something alive. Some say the walls whisper back, that in the black hours of half-sleep they hear voices that should not exist, voices that promise release, vengeance, or damnation. The Arbites dismiss this as madness, the natural erosion of sanity in the dark, but the prisoners know better. They have felt the cold breath that moves across their skin in places where no man stands. They have seen eyes glowing faintly in the corners of cells, vanishing the moment torchlight touches them. Whether demon, specter, or memory, the truth is less important than the terror. The hunger comes next. It does not strike as a sudden pang, but as a steady erosion, a gnawing hollowness that creeps into the marrow. In the first days, the stomach roars against it, twisting and demanding. But as weeks pass, the body learns to stop asking, its protest reduced to a dull ache that lives beneath the ribs like a parasite. Prisoners chew strips of their own rags, gnaw bone fragments long picked clean, and lick the moss that clings to the stone walls, though it tastes of rot and leaves the tongue raw. The Arbites provide sustenance irregularly, a gruel ladled into iron troughs or thin bread tossed across the floor like scraps to hounds. This ritual of feeding is one of the dungeon's cruelest performances. When the doors swing open and guards cast their offerings into the chamber, bodies collapse into one another in frantic desperation. Hands claw, teeth tear, nails scratch until the stones are slick with blood. Those who manage to claim a morsel retreat into corners hunched and trembling, shielding their prize with the ferocity of beasts. Others are trampled beneath the press, their ribs cracked, their throats crushed. And when the torchlight withdraws, the stronger among them will strip the fallen of what little meat remains. None speak of it, yet all know it happens. Disease thrives in such a place. Coughs echo endlessly, each one carrying the promise of death. Infected wounds ooze unchecked. Limbs swell with untreated fevers, and the air itself becomes thick with the stench of decay. Corpses are removed only when their presence begins to impede the function of the cell, and even then, the Arbites show no reverence. They drag bodies by the ankles, heads bumping over stone, leaving trails of dark fluid that stain the floor long after the flesh is gone. Yet it is not only the prisoners who fear contagion. The guards, though clad in armor, carry small incense burners at their belts, filling the air with acrid smoke meant to purify their path. They mutter half-prayers through their vox grills, as though the Emperor himself will shield them from the rot they enforce. The prisoners watch these rituals with hollow eyes, their faith twisted into resentment. For what God allows suffering so profound that even his chosen enforcers recoil from the sight of it. The screams begin at night. They echo down the corridors, distorted by distance and stone. Sometimes they are cut short by a wet gurgle. Other times they stretch on until the throat tears itself ragged. No one knows if they come from torture chambers, from ritual purges, or from something else entirely. The Arbites never explain, never acknowledge. Silence is the only answer given to those who ask. But the screams live on in memory, gnawing at sanity long after the air has stilled. It is in this crucible of pain that stories take root. Prisoners cling to rumor as though it were oxygen, whispering of secret tunnels, of Arbites slain in the night, of escapees who found passage into the hive above. These tales shift constantly, changing with each retelling, but none dare dismiss them outright. For without the promise of possibility, madness would consume them all. Some tell of specters that drift through the corridors, former inmates who never left, their souls chained to the stones by injustice. Others whisper of demons waiting in the cracks, feeding on suffering, fattening themselves on despair until the prison itself is more warped than stone. Amidst these whispers, faith itself fractures. Some cling tighter to the Emperor, chanting litanies through bloodied lips, believing that every moment of torment is a test of devotion. Others curse his name, declaring him blind, deaf, or uncaring, their hatred a final act of rebellion in a world where all else is denied. Between these extremes lies the largest number, those who no longer care one way or the other. Their prayers and curses alike fall silent, replaced by a numb acceptance that they are forgotten, swallowed by a machine too vast to notice their loss. And still the drip continues, marking time as though mocking the mortals trapped within. The walls absorb the sorrow, the floors collect the stains, and the echo of each cry becomes part of a chorus that has no beginning and no end. For in these dungeons there is no history and no future. There is only the present, the endless present of suffering without reprieve. One man, pressed into the corner of his cell, carves words into the stone with a sharpened shard of bone. His hand shakes, his body little more than skin stretched over bone, but his eyes burn with desperate clarity. The words are a prayer, though not to the Emperor. They are to something nameless, something that might listen when the master of mankind does not. He carves until his fingers bleed, and when at last the bone breaks, he falls back, lips moving silently. His neighbors pretend not to see, for even witnessing such blasphemy is dangerous, but none of them report him. They know that in the darkness everyone seeks their own gods. There are moments in the dungeon when silence arrives, and it is worse than the screams. In that suffocating stillness, every breath seems too loud, every heartbeat a trespass. The prisoners learn to dread it, for silence often comes before something unseen passes through the corridors. Torchlight does not precede it, nor the march of Arbit's boots, only the strange shift of air, as though the stones themselves inhale. Some press their foreheads to the floor when it happens, mumbling fragments of prayer, hoping to be overlooked. Others stare wide-eyed into the dark, straining to glimpse whatever it is that stalks just beyond human sight. On one such night, the silence stretched so long it became unbearable. A prisoner in one of the communal cells began to laugh, a ragged sound that startled even himself. The laughter grew until it was a cackle, until tears ran down his hollow cheeks, until the others dragged him down and smothered his voice with their filthy hands. But still he shook beneath them, his body convulsing with a mirth born not of joy but of terror too immense to hold. In the morning the guards found him dead, his lips still pulled into a smile. They did not remove his body for days. No one touched him. The Arbites, of course, deny the presence of anything unnatural. To speak of demons or specters is to invite censure, even among enforcers. Yet there are signs too plain to ignore. Chains that rattle without hands upon them. Doors that groan open in the night, though their locks remain untouched. Prisoners found with their eyes gouged out. No weapon, no attacker, only the scream frozen on their lips. The Arbits record such deaths as suicide or madness, neat words inscribed on data slates, efficient, clean, but the prisoners know. They feel the eyes upon them when the torches gutter and the air grows colder. Some whisper that the dungeon is not merely a prison but a wound, a scar upon the hive where the veil between realities thins. It is here in the darkest pits of despair that the warp brushes close to the material, Whether that wound was opened by the suffering of countless generations, or whether it was carved intentionally by the Adeptus to serve some hidden purpose, none can say. The stories shift with each telling, but all agree on one thing. The dungeon feeds on pain, and pain is never in short supply. The instruments of discipline are cruelly inventive. Prisoners are hung in cages so narrow they cannot sit, left for weeks until their bones stiffen and their voices fade. Others are strapped to restraint slabs where servitors administer calibrated shocks, each one precisely measured to break the will but not the body. The most feared punishment of all is isolation, for those placed in solitary often return not broken but emptied. Their eyes lose focus, their speech collapses into murmurs, and within days they fade into silence, as though something reached in and claimed whatever spark remained inside. It is not always cruelty from above that defines the prisoner's torment. Desperation breeds savagery. In the larger chambers, hierarchies form, fragile empires of bone and blood where the strongest take what they desire, and the weak survive only by clinging to their shadow. Every betrayal is permanent, every alliance doomed by scarcity. A crust of bread, a strip of cloth, even the comfort of another's warmth becomes currency, and currency becomes a reason to kill. And yet in this abyss rare sparks of humanity remain. A mother cradling her fevered son, whispering promises she cannot keep. A prisoner sharing the last scrap of his ration with a stranger. Small acts that mean nothing in the vast machinery of the Imperium, but everything in the moment they are given. But such moments never last. The dungeon crushes them all eventually. When dawn, or what passes for dawn, arrives, the Arbits move through the corridors, their visors impassive, their boots unerring. To them, the prisoners are not individuals but inventory. Numbers logged, bodies accounted for, cells locked, reports filed. Each man and woman here is a line on a data slate, stripped of name, stripped of story. The Arbits do not hear the whispers in the walls, nor do they care. For them, the dungeon is a mechanism, one gear in the vast machinery of the Imperium. To maintain order is enough, and so the cycle continues, screams and silence, hunger and disease, faith and blasphemy, day after day, drip after drip, until the difference between the living and the dead becomes a matter of timing. The horrors here do not come as sudden revelations, but as the slow, inevitable erosion of humanity itself. For in the Imperial dungeon, one truth becomes clear. Death is not the worst fate. To be forgotten is,